Good afternoon, everyone. Well, afternoon for myself, not so much for my guests. So, afternoon, evening. Welcome to Beyond the Outer Realm, the spin-off show of The Outer Realm, which airs every Wednesday and Thursday evening Eastern Time. We are still broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. Today, we welcome back our guest, Simon Bown. And this time, we're not talking about NDEs, but check out our last segment. You'll find out all about that. It's wonderful. But today, we're going to be discussing UFOs, the paranormal, different levels of high strangeness, perhaps how things connect, things of that nature. So without further ado, our special guest, Simon Bown. How are you?
Hi, great. It's great to be here. Nice to talk to you again.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to have you return. Our last show did so well, such a huge interest in the NDEs. And as always, I think it's just so fascinating, and it falls into the whole realm of the unexplained and so many different levels. You know, I've talked to people who've had NDEs and didn't even realize, is that what that was? It's like, yes, that absolutely sounds like it. But today we're doing something entirely different, you know, getting into, you know, the paranormal, UFOs, because as a show host yourself, I'm sure you've heard all kinds of different stories. And my curiosity stems with, I know for myself, and you know, how do you get into this sort of field? You know, some people say they're born into it. Other people say, no, it was that one experience that piqued the curiosity and then you never looked back. So what was it for you?
Well, I just always been interested. I remember being 10 years old and going to the local public library and taking books out on Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts and all sorts of things.
Yes.
And so I'm showing my age now. That would have been
Both of us.
1976.
Both of us. Yes.
So it's long before the internet. There was all of, if you wanted to find this stuff, you had to get books, really.
Yes.
In the UK anyway. And so over time, I just kept reading more and more books, anything I could find.
Mhm.
And as I got older, my interests went down to UFOs and the afterlife. But the thing with the afterlife is I'm kind of looking for proof of an afterlife.
Yes.
And I wasn't brought up in a religious household. And the neighborhood I lived in, none of the kids, none of the families were religious. So that I was always very much on the outside looking in, so to speak. And in the late 1980s, I started going to a place called the College of Psychic Studies in London, which was set up by the Society for Psychical Research, maybe 140 years ago now.
Wow.
So they've got an incredible library there. But I wasn't a student there. People could go there and be taught how to do mediumship and clairvoyance and channeling and trance and past life regressions, all sorts of things. So I'd go every couple of weeks and you just spend a little bit of money and the students could practice on you. So I would see all these different people, so many of them. And it was that thing of doing investigation. And it was then that I was taken through a past life regression. So that would have been maybe 1987. And that was a huge impact on me.
Yes.
Because, you know, the thing with a past life regression is you experience it and you're seeing all this stuff and feeling all this stuff. And if you go and see a medium, they're getting all the information, just passing it on for you. You don't have that actual experience yourself.
Yes.
And then over time, I did more and more past life regressions, people taking me through them, and I'm having these paranormal experiences, psychic things, UFO sightings, strange dreams, just all sorts of things showing up. And I decided I wanted to take people through past life regression. So I got a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy, And then I got certification in Past Life Regression Therapy,
Mhm.
and now I've been doing that for a few years, and did hundreds of sessions with people for
Mhm.
past life regressions, and at the
Yes.
same time doing these podcasts, which is our
Yes.
Paranormal Afterlife, looking
Mhm.
at evidence for an afterlife, and the other one, the Alien UFO podcast, and you can
Mhm.
guess what that one's about.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah.
Do you find, like, that, everything, it does connect? Because I started out, I did end up, with, mediumship abilities due to family members and, mother, grandmothers, aunts, things like that. So, but it was still something, and I'm sure, I don't know. I mean, England was always way ahead, than the Western world when it comes to being open, like you say, 140 years. You're
Mhm.
at an institution where people are working with you. I wish I would have had that on this side of the world. On this side of the world, it's like, well, you don't want to talk about that. The neighbors might think we're a little bit cuckoo. Okay,
Mm.
but we maybe are if this is all happening. But how everything seems to have connected, because if you start off in the field of the paranormal, I find, and this seems to be something I hear a lot, that people end up in ufology and getting into all the sub topics and the sub research that just stems from one.
Yeah, I find there's a lot of UFO podcasts that cover a lot of this disclosure thing on what's
Mhm.
happening in
Mm.
Washington. But I'm
Yes.
not really interested in that, and I don't really cover it on my podcast.
Yeah.
It's this consciousness thing I'm interested in,
Yeah.
particularly alien abduction. Some
Yeah.
people don't like to call it alien abduction
It's true. Yeah.
because some people have experiences that they say are really good, but then there's people who have experiences which are terrible. And there's
Mhm.
people who have terrible experiences when they're younger, but as they get older and older, the more they encounter the ETs, the better it gets.
Mhm.
And
Well, I
I'm
think Whitley
particularly into
Strieber is one of those people, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and, it's a thing where there's this part of it called high strangeness, which I'm particularly interested in. It's like the weirder it is, the more interested I am. And
Yeah, because you think you're somehow we're sharing space with this completely, like, weird stuff that's going on around us, and I think, that if people are paying attention, they'll have the experience. Because 'cause I've had people say, "Well, I've never seen anything like that." And I think, "I bet you have, but you're just not recognizing it, or maybe you don't have an understanding of what you're witnessing."
yeah,
Ju
so there's this weird stuff where you could have 3 people and
Mhm.
2 of them see a UFO and the 3rd one doesn't.
See, that's different too. Some people will say, like, our the owner of the network, who owns, like, probably one of the largest contactee sites in the world. There's probably about between 75 and 85,000 people over the course of the last, couple of decades who have written in with, mostly for experiencers and contactees. And what his hypothesis is, I'm like I'm talking to my phone. His hypothesis is that if you are an experiencer, you will see them. Even if you don't remember being an experiencer, you will see them. But those who maybe or have not had an experience, they just don't. They just don't see them. Do you have any thoughts on that? I find that interesting that this happens. It's an anomaly.
Yeah, I wonder if it's something to do with, frequency or
Um,
vibration, because
mhm.
mediumship, there's this frequency and vibration, and maybe the people who don't see them are not naturally at a higher level. They can't
Yes,
see that part of reality. And
that's very interesting.
I also wonder that if you see a UFO, it's because they want you to see them. They seem to be perfectly capable of moving around the skies
Mhm,
without us knowing.
mhm,
And it's like at night time and they're all covered in flashing lights. They don't
mhm.
need that. They're
No.
doing that so they can be seen.
I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wayne, this is a story with Wayne and I, absolutely, where we were traveling down a road, and it was probably about 6 o'clock at night. It was daytime in the summer, like, in the evening, and I saw this I had had a vision of this exact moment, and we were driving that this one time, and I said, "Do you see that?" And he goes, "I don't see anything." I'm like, "We're driving into it." It was like a full half moon, big arch, all in pastels, a big arch, and it was just like glowing in all of these colors. And I couldn't find any natural, like in research, any natural reason for it to be there. But if it was natural, I would have thought he would have seen it. And he didn't see it. He goes, I don't see what you're seeing. I'm like, and what's strange is the area I saw it in was only maybe about 5 kilometers from where the image of the vision that I had was. And it was probably like, I don't know, many months later, maybe even a year later.
So have you seen UFOs? Have you had any of those sorts of experiences?
Oh, I'm an experiencer from childhood. I'm a generational experiencer. But you know what I find interesting and why I asked about connection? Just look, I'd had these as a child, and I remember asking my mom about it before she passed. I said, you ever had any of these experiences? Because remember, I grew up in a family that's like, oh, it means I might not want to talk about that. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, my dad would be, oh, yeah, we'd see them up north because I grew up in northern Canada with no satellites back then, aging myself as well. So when you saw something zinging across the night sky, you probably were seeing, a UFO. And I watched one come down one night. It took about 20 minutes, came down, then it zipped off. The next day, our valley, which was right, around a lake. Basically, there were military helicopters all around it. They were looking, obviously, for what had transpired the night before. But I just find that I had so many paranormal experiences, and now that I've researched this as an adult, I realize, were those all paranormal experiences? Because I'm talking to my mother and she's like, oh no, this happened. And, your sister was initially a twin and then all of a sudden there wasn't. And I'm going, oh, I hear about this now? Like what? And my grandparents and their grandparents. So now the experiences I have are mind blowing. Not that I don't remember them all, which is concerning. But the ones I do recall, or the ones where I'm wide awake, are very, very interesting. So
and I think it's weird in some way that it's like some of you don't remember. I suppose you have hints or ideas that something might have happened, and then others you do remember. And it seems that if it's the Greys, whoever's doing it, they seem to be able to control our memories and erase them or block them or something. But if you remember them, maybe they didn't block it on purpose. They want you to remember her.
Well, and some of them I'm wide awake when it happens. I said, just, like I like the portal. I saw that. There were times I'd be driving and I'd say, where are you? And I'd get a flash in the sky that would go, choo, choo, and it would close right away. Not on demand, but I'll tell you, like many times I would drive by, I knew exactly where to look and I would just ask. It sort of brings me, and I mean, I've seen ET as well. I've had experiences like that also. But it makes me just wonder, as to the full connections between the paranormal and being a contactee. It's just very interesting to me. But you look at people doing CE5s, people all over the world doing CE5, and you had Russian scientists doing it in the 80s. Like, we didn't have to go to space. We would just call them. I remember reading that one time back in the 80s. I'm like, what? Wow, that's genius, but I mean, telepathically, I think as an experiencer, like I've just put it out there and there it is, not always right away, but sometimes within a week or two, then you end up with an incredible experience and fully wide awake. And then it's done,
Do you feel any of this is a thing where you're on a spiritual path and that every time you have an experience, it moves you another step along your path? So part of it, why they're doing it, is to raise your consciousness and get you to fulfill your life plan. Or like maybe they wanted you to be a communicator, to get this information out there. And not just about UFOs, but about all sorts of the paranormal stuff, about the afterlife. And it's about raising something on Earth by all people communicating. Because I had a sighting, and I was driving on the motorway. I'd done a gig with my band, and we packed up and we left the place. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving along, and we drive on the left, and this part of this motorway I knew very well because I use it a lot. And on the left, 1 a.m., this empty field, there was a really bright light there. And I thought, that's weird. What maybe they're doing emergency electrical works or something. So when I got to that point, I slowed right down, maybe 5 miles an hour, and I checked my mirrors, and there were no other cars, which was weird for that time of night and that space. And when I got there and I saw it, it was like the size of a large house, shaped like a rugby ball, 25 feet off the ground, just 200 feet from me.
Wow.
It was completely silent, didn't move an inch the whole time. There's a really powerful white spotlight coming out of it towards the ground. And now I think about it, it's that classic tractor beam UFO abduction when they're taking somebody out.
Did you have missing time? Did you have missing time?
No, I didn't. I knew enough to check that when I got home.
Simon's late for the gig. Yeah. Wow.
But I wonder if I saw it because they wanted me to see them. That's what I wonder.
So. I think so. I mean, well, let's explore it. So you have the sighting. How did it change you? Like, it made you want more, more answers? Did it enlighten you in a different way? Just to kind of go like, oh my God, I saw this incredible anomaly.
Well, this happened in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So I'd been reading books for years, things like Betty Andreson, Travis Walton, Whitley Strieber.
Yes.
All the usual suspects.
Yes.
So
yes.
I did have a lot of information on it, but so it was really quite exciting. I wasn't scared at all.
Yes.
And so that was a major sighting for me.
Patsy would like to know, did a crop circle appear where you saw that ball that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Yes, because it was out in the field, right?
Yeah, but that field, I think, was like a cattle field. So there'd be cows there all day eating all the grass.
Yes, that's true. So that would definitely put a damper on that. I agree with you with your theory that I think a lot of it is spiritual enlightenment. I truly believe that we are here to evolve. We have to keep going. We have to keep evolving. Otherwise, you're a hamster on a wheel. And in order to evolve, I think you do need to be able to match, a certain frequency or vibration. You have to resonate with, the planet around you and consciousness. And I think that extraterrestrial beings, I believe there are many races. That's what they're here to do. They are here to enlighten you. I mean, if I've had bad experiences, I definitely don't recall them. So they're doing me a favor. But I can tell you that a lot of my experiences have been really good. I mean, sometimes to the point of almost being really emotionally amazing for me, like it can be very incredible. But the ones I don't remember, do I want to? People like, have you considered hypnosis? Like, I don't know, because I can't close that door after that. Ignorance is bliss, baby. As a researcher, I find it's like an oxymoron for me saying that, because I'm always so intent on uncovering everything. But then I also believe that maybe I'm just not supposed to know it if it's being kept from me.
Yeah. Maybe you'll get the feeling one day that is what you need to do. Because I wonder, because I take people through past life regression.
Oh, you'll get a call from me if that's the case. Yeah.
I get the feeling that people are guided to do a past life regression. It's something they think about, then they keep thinking about it. And it's like the spirit guides or whoever's doing it is putting these subconscious nudges in that they want them to do it. So maybe you'll get to a point where you'll get that nudge that now is the time to do the hypnosis.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that everything that's recovered under hypnosis is true. Most of it is, but there's always a problem there.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, I don't know. I'm such a believer that I remember what I meant to, at least for that moment. So I'd like to think, because if I do get downloads and I get visions and things like that, and I'm a traveler when I sleep. Besides that, because I have vivid memories of some, but I think that it's given to you as you need to know it, it's all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I think I remember this one time. And meanwhile, I'm just thinking, oh, okay, maybe it's a bad memory, or maybe it's just something that, no, you have a bad memory, but they gave you this one, you know. I don't know. I just know that my journey has been an interesting one. I know that I do, energy work, planetary energy work. I've worked with human beings, like people, not just in clearings and consultations and things like that, for decades. And I just seem to, I'm told, if like, for example, if you and I are talking and there's something you need to know, I always instinctively know what to say to people. And they're like, oh, I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know where it comes from. And I won't remember it afterwards. People say, do you remember when you said this to
Yes.
me? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I don't know. So I mean, are those just gifts that come in as you need them as well? I always instinctively know what to say or what to do. If I'm doing energy work, I don't have to really go through a process. I can just think about it and I can do it. Because I always say I'm a steward of the planet, which is also for a big extraterrestrial thing. Good races really want to protect this planet.
Well, it's interesting you say that about stewards of the planet in a way. I did a past life regression with somebody, and they went to a past life on another planet.
Mm-hmm.
And in that past life, they were a kind of aquatic creature, like maybe like a
Ah,
dolphin or a whale.
wow.
And their job was to look after these creatures that were much, much bigger. And so
Wow.
they were in training to become one of these huge creatures. So they would just be looking after this one. But this huge creature, its job was to send positive psychic energy around the planet. So that's why it
Wow.
reminded when you said stewards of the planet, and
Mhm.
there were lots of these creatures around the planet linked in a kind of psychic web. So the whole planet was receiving this positive psychic energy. And it was
Wow.
this guy was in training to become one of those creatures. So
Wow.
we got to a point in the regression where his spirit guide was there, and I said, "How many past lives has he had?" And the guide said, "One. This is the first life on Earth." And I was saying, "Why did you show us this past life before?" And they said, "You were in training to learn how to put out this positive psychic energy, and the training was for this life. You were preparing to come to Earth so you could help with the raising the Earth's psychic stuff."
Wow, how fantastic is that? I wonder, there you have one aquatic being. It's just putting out an incredible amount of frequency to be able to get into the planets or the people or whatever, the collective. And here, I think it's just so many energy workers. And I've worked with incredible people all over the world. It's just I love that there's just so many people out there who are of like mind. And I can't tell you how many say, no, I mean, they're also experiencers. And it's just, no, just you have to take care of it. This is very, it's very important because this is what sustains all life.
And have you ever had experiences? Have you had that thing of ETs taking you somewhere on one of their ships or something?
Yes, I don't doubt that. I've had people say, "I saw you on the ship." I'm going, "I'm glad you remember." But no, I have visions where I'm looking out of, I'm looking out of a window, for example, and I'm looking out into the stars. And I the one experience that I had, it was just almost like a ship, a regular ship's portal, like one of our seafaring ships. I'm looking out of a ship portal, but because that's how I'm associating that I'm looking out of something round, and but I'm looking at the stars. Other times I'm coming up under something and I look up and I could see like there's something over me, and it's a ship. But but that's about it. I get little tiny snippets. But yet I can be awake and have incredible experiences, just see all kinds of things, like I mean, Wayne and I, again, because we're just driving and things just automatically find us. And at one point we had something that looked like a Chinese lantern and it was just floating right like up. And I'm looking at it going, but it's a light. It's crazy looking thing. Another time we had like a pyramid, like two pyramids together, it's like elongated to point it in. And it just floated right over the hood of the truck. We're just like, holy shit. Like and I mean, this isn't like late at night. I mean, there's a full array of vehicles on the road at this time. Like one was in the middle of the day, the pyramid thing, and the other one was like it was in the evening, but it was wintertime and it was probably 6 o'clock at night. It's not like it's, there's cars everywhere. And you're just sort of like, is anybody else seeing this stuff?
Yeah, it's that thing again, the frequency.
Yeah.
If they have the frequency.
Yes.
But yeah, I was talking to Mike Clellins the other day. Do you know Mike Clellins?
I've heard, yeah. I've heard of him.
He was saying that he had this experience where he found himself on board a ship and he was one of the Greys.
Yeah. Wow, crazy.
And yeah. He was taken into a room on board this UFO that looked like a really corny 1970s office boardroom with orange carpet and plastic folding tables and chairs. And this is part of the high strangeness of it all.
Yeah.
And at this boardroom table were 8 Greys facing him.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like he was like a naughty boy being taken to see the elders.
Wow.
But they said to him something like, "You volunteered for this. We didn't realize it was going to be this hard, but now is the time to start." But they didn't tell him what it was that's going to start or what he needed to start. But it's that thing of the high strangeness of this 1970s office inside this UFO, and that he's a Grey as well, almost like they had taken his consciousness.
Yes.
Or his spirit onto the ship, left his body behind.
Yes. I find it all extremely fascinating. I mean, there are people like who have visions. Wayne was telling me about one time he was just like saying, I need answers. Like he just finally got really fed up. And he said, like, I found myself in like, I think it was like in a forest, but yet it was like an office, but you could see through like the walls and it was just very, very official with a desk and with a chair. But this ethereal being, like very, very wise. Right. And it's just like you see that was not happy to have to be explaining anything to me. So it's like it's a curiosity, I guess, as to everybody's experiences, but this is also a guy who at 4 years old, at his birthday party, just basically throws up on the table and says, "Oh my God," looks at his hands and goes, "I'm a child again." At 4. I'm like, what is that? Like a step in? Or, it's just like the original essence, so traumatized to be here that the step in got in there and said, "All right, I'll take over." Like, it's just bizarre how these sort of things happen. And he's also an experiencer.
Yeah, I mean, when I was, this was 20 years ago or so, my daughter was 4 years old. She said to me, "I used to pick you up when you were this small."
Wow.
So there's that kind of hint of reincarnation. That may have been what he did when he threw up. It was just a memory that he has just reincarnated.
Yeah.
And maybe what am I doing? Why did I come back here?
I didn't read the fine print. He always says, if we chose this, I didn't read the fine print. I was lied to. So I was like, wow, that's a bit harsh, but okay. But I love the reincarnation thing. But I mean, what is your theory on the soul trap with the whole?
I don't see any evidence for it.
Yeah.
And I talked to somebody else about this who's done thousands of past life regressions, but I've done over 170 UFO podcasts and talked to a lot of people because they're all interview episodes. And I've read so many books over the decades. I've taken hundreds of people through past life regressions and I've been taking through them. I can see no evidence at all for something like a soul trap.
It's really on the move right now. Like, it's really being talked about a lot right now. I thought, God, that's just, I've had guests talk about it. I seem to see it on certain platforms, and it's just like it's really fascinating to explore. But like, because they go back to the being enticed, like the past life. So very, very enticing. They're very encouraging about it when they talk about it. Just society in general. Because we're like, oh yeah, we want to know all about it. Like that's really glamorized, and then you're conditioned to fear the darkness, and you're conditioned to go to the light, go to the light, go to the light. Yet you hear about some people having experiences going to the dark who end up having great experiences. Like they're,
Yeah.
but I think it's the conditioning of everything, and that people are starting to question everything. And maybe it's a sign of the times. I don't know, but I just think that people are questioning their own mortality, perhaps. We just seem to go through these cycles. It's just like with the paranormal. We go back to what's called like the Ghostbusters era of the 80s. It cycles back around 20 years later. I think in the 60s and 70s, it was big in reincarnation and just the love and light and all of this. And then it's cycling back around again. I find in the last couple of decades where people are just so intrigued with it, just like looking for their lineage, because there's a strong belief that the connections that you will reincarnate sometimes back into your own families, like yourself, your conversation with your daughter, and people kind of go, God, do we always reincarnate back into our own lines?
Well, there's the idea of the soul group, isn't there, or the soul family,
Yeah.
and maybe 20 or 30 of them, and you will get together before you're born and work out
Mhm.
which role you're going to play in the next life. It's almost
Yes.
like putting on a play, and everybody gets the script, and you have to decide who's
Who's
going to
who?
play which part.
Yes.
And so you might be somebody's brother, and then the next life you'll be their father, and all
Hmm.
these different changes happen, and you agree. Like
Hmm.
somebody will say, in my next life, I need a really awful father, and somebody else will say, "Oh, I'm really good at being an awful father. I'll do that for you." And it's
Right.
it's like helping each other evolve. And
Yeah.
I had somebody said to me that we have this thing where we might think, well, if there's reincarnation, the next time I come back is going to be an easy life. I'm going to be rich and or
Sure.
something. But
Yeah.
then they said, this is the next life. You might have thought that in your last life, but this is the next one you chose. What you're experiencing here is part of a plan.
Mhm. Mhm. Sometimes the plan just goes away. It just goes in directions. But what are your thoughts on the whole Matrix theory?
Well, there's a thing where we talk about simulation, and for me,
Yeah.
as soon as I hear that, I think of computers,
Mm.
servers, and
Mhm.
coding and software.
Mhm.
But I wonder if it's not like that. If it's something spiritual, there could be some kind of a matrix in a way, because in a way we're avatars, aren't we? As human
Mhm.
beings, we're containing our soul or our spirit, and
Mhm.
that there may be something that you could say is like a simulation or a matrix, but
Mhm.
it's not at all like the film, and
Yes.
that we're victims and we're forced into it.
Mhm.
It's part of
Yeah.
the progress. But I think that everything gets so complicated and also so far away from our understanding. We can
Mhm.
just come up with these different ideas to try and explain this madness.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, there's got to be, something. I mean, people will see, birds, for example, stop in mid-flight and just are frozen, like little glitches. I mean, this stuff is surfacing long before the age of AI. CGI, yes. But when you're looking at video, there was one I made mention of before where a police officer was driving and he was heading into a very rural area, looked at very forested, as he was going around the road. And he stopped and he's like, what is that? And he got out and how they have like recorders on the cars and stuff like that, right? Like here in the United States, they have dash cameras and things like that. And he goes and he sees it. It's like this cup of coffee, but like just like a takeout cup. And he's moving his hand under it. It's just sitting there. And he's like this. He's like going around it. And you hear him. He's just like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. And when he went to grab it, it dropped. I said there was nothing, because he's like, is this something like is there a string here? Is there something that is, and it just dropped. So I don't know. I think every now and then, the universe is pretty incredible, but some of the stuff was definitely an anomaly. High strangeness.
Yeah, it's such weirdness. So like I had a thing. There was a Chinese restaurant close by that was great. It's my favorite Chinese place,
Yeah.
and I knew it well. And one morning on the way to work, I drive past it every day, and it had been a fire, a really nasty fire, and the whole front was boarded up and all the soot up the walls. And I was like, oh man, that's my favorite restaurant. And so I'd be going past it on my commute. And then one morning I went past it and it was back to normal. It was completely back the way it was before the fire. And I thought, wow, they did a great job on that. It looks great now. It's like back how it was.
Yeah.
And I went to work, and on the way home, it had the boards up on the windows again. And so I saw it how it
Wow.
was before the fire. And I think back, I think, was I crazy? Did I imagine that? But at the same time, when it happened, it really stood out to me because it was my favorite
Yeah.
Chinese restaurant,
Well,
and I
yeah,
was
because
so
it
amazed.
caught your attention. It was enough to catch your attention and comment on it.
Yeah. So
Like
it kind of reminds me of the Mandela effect or something, or
it
time
does.
slips.
It does. Time slips are incredible as well. What do you think causes a time slip? Like, what's your thoughts on a time slips? And I'll
I
tell
don't
you
know.
a story after. Yeah.
Okay. My first thing that comes to mind is that phrase, "a glitch in the matrix."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
heard of this woman at a university, and she had to get a book from an office, a big office, and she went in, and there was this woman on one of those ladders on the high shelf getting a book down, and she
Yeah.
looked up at her, and she was dressed really old-fashioned clothes, but she just went in, got her book, and left. And she thought, who was that woman? And then later on, she spotted this woman's portrait, and like she died 100 years before. And she felt like when she went in that room, it was as the room was in the past. It wasn't that she'd seen a ghost of hers.
Yeah.
It was like she'd gone back in time, like a time slip.
Wow. There's a lot of those in the UK. When I researched them for a show at one point, where people are just walking through these old, old, because so much of the UK, I love the UK. I have a lot of friends and family there, and so many areas, it's like time really it does stand still. You can walk into a nice quiet space and go, God, I've just stepped back a few hundred years, because you guys value so much of your past and your architecture, and they just don't make things like that anymore. You come to the new side of the world, you're lucky if you find a 300-year-old building that's still standing, But I mean, so many stories that I've read of people just going, that they went into, especially like in York, "Oh, we're down these little cobblestone side streets, and I'm going into this store." And all of a sudden I'm in a whole other store that's gone way back in time. And I'm looking at stuff going, what is all this stuff? It's not. And then I step out of it, and then it's like, and it's back to the hat store I was going in to look at, for example. It was just very, very obscure. And there's a lot of stories like that. But a story well, both Wayne and I know people personally who have said that as kids, they'd had experiences. And both of these experiences, and these are people who do not know each other, but we know them, they were children running around the house with their friends. And they were running around. All of a sudden, they're not there. Like, they're walking around the house. They can hear their parents calling them. They're looking for their friends. They can't find them, and so they run back the other way, and they're back. And the one kid was just like, because my parents are yelling at me, we've been looking for you for 2 hours, where are you? Because I could hear you, but I couldn't get back to you. And is that like the frequency thing? You're just changing the vibration.
Yeah. It's so strange. Would they have been ghosts to somebody in the future or the past who had seen them?
It's so crazy. Like you're being called and you're walking through the house and they're not there, but you're in your house. It's crazy. Those sort of things just fascinate me. I'm just like, come on. Like it's just,
Mhm.
and the fact that I knew someone with the same story, and Wayne goes, "Oh yeah, my buddy was telling me a story about that, and I think it happened to him, his friend." I'm just like, when he was little, I'm going, "This is craziness." Um, Wayne says he had a vision about talking, or he had a vision about talking to a hybrid female who told me that this world was built for our species to learn how to be in the physical because she had evolved beyond the need of a physical body.
Yeah, I've heard of stuff like that. I talked to a guy, I think his name was Yossi Ronan, Israeli guy who was having experiences.
Hmm.
And he said one of the greys said to him telepathically,
Hmm.
basically, this is not who we are. Where we come from, we don't have a physical body. And when we come here, what you see is imprinted upon us by you. You decide what we look like in this space.
See? And how we perceive that, I think, from humanity, when we see a being that they are projecting, they decide by projecting an image to us of how they want us to see them. For example, you hear like they'll say, "Oh, he's a shapeshifter." I'm thinking, God, it'd be hard to shapeshift, but I imagine there are beings out there that can shapeshift, or are they just projecting an image of how they want us to visualize them? So this to me is a whole other thing, saying that we're deciding how we want to see them is just, you see what I mean? Like every time you come to one perhaps theory that works, you realize, oh wait, there's another one.
Yeah, yeah.
Which one is it? Are there 2? Are there like it's just is it like all the world's a stage? Is this all one big illusion?
Yeah, because there's that idea that the greys are all clones and that they're almost manufactured in a factory somewhere. All the short ones are almost robotic, and it's only the tall greys
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
are real. But
yeah.
also, they the smaller greys, the way they look, they're
Mhm,
like us, the 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, and they
mhm,
are just fine on Earth's gravity and Earth's atmosphere, its pressure. They don't seem to be affected by our viruses and bacteria,
mhm,
almost like they were genetically engineered to be able to survive on Earth and do
mhm,
the job they needed to do.
mhm. Hmm. Yeah, just, their evolution, so different than ours. Wayne continues to say, "Without the physical," she explained, "we became very unfeeling, uncaring for beings with a physical body." She said it was built for them to learn, but also for other beings to actually see if they can learn from, I guess, our experiences is what I'm guessing. We are failing in a huge way. We are. I think in some ways, yes, we are. Yes, we are. Um, yeah, it is so interesting. I have equipment that I've had built, and you could it speaks essentially, right? It's sort of based on the Nikola Tesla design. But there have definitely one time, I got this new piece that came in and let's just test it. And it was on a night where all the planets, there were 5 planets lined up a certain way. This is a few years ago. And all of a sudden we crank this thing on and I'm just like, what are we listening to? It sounded like a really bad 50s American movie. I'm like, oh, it's terrible. What is this? But I realized soon that something that was speaking to us, it sounded like they were in an old plane, like an old military plane. You can hear the propellers. There were 3 of them, 3 distinct voices. There was nothing else in the background, nothing. And they started talking, and I'm talking to Wayne going, "What is this?" And they're like, "Oh, did you just hear that?" And they're pretty much describing what, like, I'm saying. And it goes, "It sounds like the Queen." I'm like, "The Queen?" Like, but I'm told Canadians have accents, so I don't know. I guess these guys had no clue, but I'm just like, "Wow, not really, but alright." But so at this point, they're describing, there's a man and a woman sitting at a table, they have electricity. And I'm just looking around. Somebody else, it's just us, okay. And I said, "What's your rank and position?" As it wasn't hard to figure out that I was dealing with some kind of Air Force or military at that point. And he goes, "Major," said his name, "ma'am." And I said, "What's your position?" And the coordinates they gave, we got 2 out of 3, I think. It put them over the Pacific. And I'm like, "What do you see?" And they're like, "We see nothing. It's completely dark. We're lost." And I'm like, "Dark?" They're like, "We see nothing." And then one says, "There's a door." I'm just like, "A door?" They're like, "Yeah, there's a door." I'm like, "Oh my god." I'm like, "Do not come through that door." I had visions of like some B-52 tearing the tower off a house or something. And they're like, "Please, please help us. We're lost." And they disappeared completely because I was just like, you don't think rational at that point. You don't even believe what you're actually hearing. Because my rational brain goes, "No, no, no, it is a bad B movie," you know, but until you hear them describe what they're seeing, that they're describing you.
Yeah. And the thing with the door made me think maybe that's their way out into the light. Maybe they were shot down and they
Yeah.
didn't know they died and they'd just been stuck there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, "Don't come through the door." But rationally speaking, like, I'm not being rational at that point. I'm just sitting here going, "Okay, wait a minute, like, this is like, it's loud, they see me, they see us," which is a really scary concept if you're thinking that something's gonna come tearing through, because there have been stories of time slips where entire planes have appeared and then just, disappeared again. You guys have an incredible story in the UK about a guy who was circling an old airfield, so on, like it was a total time slip. And the people on the ground, he's seeing people on the ground, he's going, "This isn't right. This shouldn't be. We don't have this. Like, what is this?" But then, like a few years later, he ends up at that Air Force base because they end up opening it up, and he sees all of these new planes that were certain color paint, which is exactly what he saw before. But it was like this was all. It was an anomaly, and they're like, so he lands here at some point, and is years later, and they're like, "Oh my God, he asked about when did these come into commission?" And like, "Oh, these are new." And he's just like, "I saw this back, blah, blah, blah." And he was going, and the people on the ground are going, "We saw a plane that went back, like it went way back." Goes, and
Yeah.
they just sort of looked at each other. Yeah, this story, when I found it, was amazing, but it ended up afterwards being elaborated on because Ancient Aliens ended up taking the story and playing it. And I'm just going, this is incredible. Like, how many things like this are happening all over the place.
Well, I remember seeing a report on the TV, and it was like an early evening show after the
Yeah,
news. And there
yeah,
was this guy who was some kind of surveyor. This RAF base had shut down. It was completely empty, and he was walking around just taking notes and talking into this dictaphone about what he was seeing.
yes,
So it was all derelict. But when
yeah.
he got back to the office, he listened back to the dictaphone, and when he was in that empty canteen, he can hear loads of voices and cutlery, like there's whole loads of people in there eating,
Wow.
and some kind of time slip with the audio there.
Yeah, time slip, or was it like an imprint in
Yeah.
time and space? Either way, like even residual energy is fascinating when you get into how many paranormal researchers pick up when they're doing EVPs and such, and they're picking up residual stuff. I mean, I've had recordings of phantom furniture where it's like chains being dragged across a hardwood floor, but meanwhile, I'm at location. It's all brand new lush carpeting in this person's house. And then I have had experiences in the same house, which is crazy. So there's got to be some vibration thing going on there. And it's in the basement level, and there's somebody walking with heavy boots on old wooden floors, sitting on a squeaky bed or a squeaky chair, and picks up the recorder, and you could hear the recorder being handled. And I'm just going, that's bloody amazing. but the whole place was giving up stuff like that, but it did not match the time. So is there some kind of a crossover in time there, or is it all residual? I would have thought residual until I heard the recorder being picked up and handled. You can hear it like, and then it gets set back down.
Sounds really creepy.
It does, but in the same respect, it's sort of like, wow, which is it? What are we experiencing? Because this tells me it's real time if the equipment's being handled, but none of the sounds are matching the environment.
Yeah. It's like it seems there's some of it is residual, like a recording, and then other
Yeah.
stuff is they're actually there and you can interact with them.
Yeah.
There's a famous story in the UK of a guy working below a building, maybe one of the big museums. I can't remember exactly. And he's in this kind of corridor underground. He's on a ladder doing some painting.
Mm.
And then these Roman soldiers walk through, but they come out of the wall, walk across the hall, and go into the wall opposite. And he said that he could only see them from the waist up. And that in the Roman times there would have been less earth there, and that they for them would have been standing on the ground. And he freaked out and he went back upstairs and he saw his boss, and his boss said, "Did you see the Roman soldiers?" So it was like it was a known thing, but for the soldiers, they just seemed to be on a march on their way somewhere. It wasn't that they were really conscious.
No, again, I tend to wonder if it was residual. There's a place in the United States called Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, USA. It's the same idea. People have reported seeing soldiers, but half from the waist up. They don't see anything below that. So I just wonder, is it if it's a dimensional thing with that, or it's so bizarre to think. But I love how the similarities crisscross from one part of the world to the other part of the world. It's just, I don't know. Is the soldier thing, frequency thing, is it, you know, along the same parallel? Like, there's just so many things that you could think of. That's just,
Yeah.
to get these like real answers. Contessa had a question. There are many stories of people disappearing in plane, ships, etc. Are there any stories of any of them coming back and staying?
I haven't heard of any. I've heard of that kind of thing where you have walk-ins with people.
Mhm.
I read about a story, and this was from like 1912 in Poland. This 15-year-old girl nearly died,
Mhm.
and when she recovered from her illness, because she was unconscious, she was speaking this foreign language, and they didn't know who or what this language was. And
Crazy.
eventually, they worked out it was Spanish, and they got someone in who could speak Spanish. And the
Mhm.
girl started saying, "It was, what am I doing here? I live in Madrid. I'm middle-aged. What am I doing in this body, in this country?" And they were able to
Wow.
describe things that
Mhm.
in Madrid that were correct. And they talked about this pot. This is the one thing I remember. They'd have this big kind of iron pot, and then there'd be like a pyramid of iron rods with chains, and they'd hang the pot in the middle of this pyramid.
Mhm.
And you think, oh, this is for cooking. But she said, no, we'd fill it with hot coals and this would heat the room. And it's such a weird, obscure thing, but they checked, and that is they would do in Spain for heating.
Oh, that is so crazy. Like, again, walk in, um, it's fascinating to me. I know of people disappearing. I had visited the haunted forest of Romania, and the story with that states that a young girl went 5 years old, went missing there at some time, just like a shepherd had gone missing, with this entire flock up on top of this mountain. And so did this young girl. So it's known, I think, as Romania's Bermuda Triangle. But the weird thing is she returned like 5 years later. She's still 5 years old, but she was not the same individual like up here. I mean, how could it be? Come back at 5 and you're still 5, but she was just totally like withdrawn, disconnected. So there's that story, and there's one of a man named Bruce. Gurman, who says to be the only survivor of the Bermuda Triangle. He went in with a plane did all these erratic things. He said he got into what was called like the heart of the whole phenomenon, I guess, and came out the other side. He said it felt more like an electronic fog. Goes, it was very strange. But beyond that, I've not heard of anything. And with the Romania one, like, I mean, I don't know. That's the story, but is it a story? Is it factual? Is it? I would think that Bruce Gurman's story would be, because that's in I think it was like in the 70s or 80s, something like that. So that is at least something that is documented, and he as a pilot spoke of that experience. And the reason I remember it is because he was able to describe what the phenomenon was as he went through it. This other little girl apparently was completely disconnected and didn't offer a lot of information, at least none that was documented. So, but if they are both correct, then obviously it's something, you can travel someplace and come back. Or is it a time slip, and she ended up someplace else and then just slipped back in 5 years later. Like the little boys running around the house, right?
Yeah, because we hear about things with UFOs, don't we? Where it seems sometimes people can be taken and then they're brought back just after they were taken, but they might have been gone for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's a guy called Jim Sparks who talks about that. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
He said that he was at home on the couch watching the TV, and he remembered he needed to feed the fish. So he went up and he put some fish food in, and then he got a drink out of the fridge, came back and sat down, and then this whole abduction thing happened. And when he came back, he was standing at the back of the room watching himself feeding the fish and then getting a beer out of the fridge.
So strange.
Yeah.
Wow. See, so there's something with how the time or space is manipulated in one way or another. I truly believe also when we sleep, we travel. I remember Wayne one time saying, he goes, okay, weird thing. Wayne's, like the other half, if anybody's wondering why I speak about it. We share the same space. That's why I know all these cool things. But one time he says, I got up in the middle of the night, just went to the bathroom, come back, and you were completely talking in like Aramaic. And whoever it was, you were quite disgruntled. I'm always disgruntled. I don't know. But anyway, so apparently this was a thing. I said, you need to record this stuff. He goes, it's the middle of the night. I'm not even thinking straight. All I'm doing is going, holy shit, what am I hearing? So I get that. Okay, I'll give it to you. But, I believe we travel. And I believe that, maybe we come back with some of these experiences. Teresa said, she did a meditation, fell asleep. Next thing, I awoke speaking Hindi. She goes, I am not from India, and I do not know the language in this life. So I don't know. It's just, it's interesting how easy it is for us to, I think, slip back and forth. Some of the experiences we're having, we're really having them, but we just don't have that recollection. And is it crossing over? Is one phenomenon crossing into the other?
And I wonder if coma does that as well. There was a guy in Australia who was in a coma, and when he woke up, he could speak Mandarin, I think it was.
Wow.
And he's now a TV presenter in China because they find him to be quite an oddity. And this thing, he'd never had much Chinese lessons, just a little bit when he was at school, when he was a kid.
And he's speaking full on.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's been doing it for years now. And there's all sorts of stories about this. But with coma, there's people who come out of a coma and said they lived an entire life or several years of a life on another Earth. And it's as though it was a multiverse thing, and they joined the body of the other version of them. And for them, this life was very real. They had the full day job, and they went home in the evening, had an apartment, they had partners and children. And then there was a guy, it was something like he had 7 days of coma, and when he woke up, he said he'd lived 22 years on another Earth.
Wow.
And that he had a tour of duty for a year in a war in a Southeast Asian country that doesn't exist on this Earth. And he said he thought when he woke up here, this was the dream, because the other thing was so real. That was a real life.
Time obviously works very differently, because there's a similar story I recently heard of, and it was a boy or teenager on, I guess, a sports field, and he'd been knocked out and we're just talking moments, but during this time, he lived a life, he had a family. He came out of it, they brought him out of it after, a few minutes, and he was in mourning. At that point, he was never the same because he was grieving his family. He had to do counseling to help him cope with the fact that he had had this other existence that was so real and so profound that it stuck with him. So when I hear these things, it's incredible. Have you ever heard the story? And I'm asking this one specifically because I think there's still a standing reward for it. A woman fell into some time slip, and she woke up one morning in what looked like something similar to her apartment, wearing different pajamas. She went to her place of work, which was the same building but looked different. In her life, as she remembered, she had a fiance of 7 years, and his daughter, which was like a stepdaughter for her, and she couldn't find him. There was no record of him in this specific time, and she put out a reward for anybody that could get her back to her own time. And as far as I know, this was like quite a few years ago now. I mean, I probably read about it, probably about 5 years ago, and something definitely at that point, it was at least 5+ years. But like, how terrifying is that your whole life can just, like, what's the real timeline? Like, when did it shift, and which one's real?
Maybe they're both real. Maybe it's a multiverse and there's lots of
Yeah,
versions of us. There's a
yeah,
reincarnation theory around that.
yeah,
When we incarnate, there's loads of us.
yeah, yeah,
It's like that film, isn't it? Everything, everywhere, all at once.
yes. So you believe we can live, like, our soul or our essence can live simultaneous lives? Do you believe
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that?
I've seen
Yeah,
that in reincarnation,
yeah,
in past life regression, where somebody will die
mhm,
and they'll die in the past life in 52, and when
yes.
they come back, they're born in 1948, so they're living 48 to 52 in 2 different bodies.
Wow. Wow, so it splits basically. That's just
Yeah, it's the thing where your soul, um, it's like it's in the afterlife. There's no time in the afterlife, it's all the
Mhm,
now. So your
right,
soul experiences all of your past lives in the same moment,
mhm.
and I've had it described like the river of time, and you can stand on the side of the river and walk up and down the bank as much as you want to choose the time that you wanna dive into.
Wow. Oh, it's hard. I guess that's why we gravitate maybe towards certain lives. Like, I gravitate very heavily into one of my medieval lives, which and to the point of whatever it was, however I lived it, um, it resonates so strong with me that, I mean, my most of my home looks like what you see in the back. Like, I find comfort in being among that kind of a decor or environment. And I've traveled many parts of the world. You always will always find me in old cathedrals or castles or really old village environments and things like that. I gravitate to a lot of that. It's very, very strange. So it's just like, well, you're looking for your past lives. I often say to myself, I wonder if my past life is looking for me, or if I'm in a time slip and I need to go back, because you really feel like for some of us, it's like a real sense of loss, that we feel this, like being in a void, because we resonate so strongly with a certain time. Um, but you just can't get back there.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. I don't experience that myself, and I've been taken through all these different past lives and seen different, um, you know, eras, different times, but
Mhm,
I wouldn't say any of them I'm particularly fond of. Although I do like Italy a lot, and I've seen a past life in Venice.
mhm. That's interesting. That's interesting. See, we just resonate with places. She goes, as in different timelines or past lives. Not my intention to interrupt, but suddenly I'm lost. Poor Heidi. so, can you elaborate? Because we probably lost you. So, okay, so past lives are we talking a reference to reincarnation, or do we? Because now I'm lost. Just reading your comment. Yeah, if you could just specify, that would be great because we're moving along at a pretty good pace here. Sorry, Heidi.
What I'd specify really is that I hear loads of things, but I haven't
Yes.
got any of the answers.
Yeah.
There seems to be that our soul splits off into lots of versions of us
Mhm.
in lots of different universes,
Mhm.
and there may be different timelines as well, because they say it could be that every time you make a decision, another timeline's created,
See, we
and
got you
there's
now, Heidi. She
the
says, "Thank you, Simon." Yeah.
I kind of see this analogy as like the soul is like a tree, and there's all
Mhm.
these leaves. And as
Mhm.
the tree experiences all the leaves at the same time, the soul experiences all the lives at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yes.
And it's difficult because in that space, time doesn't exist. There's no timelines.
Yes.
And
Yes.
for us, there is time.
Yes. So, what a timeline, a past life could really be like a timeline because we have the time. But I mean, who knows where, depending on where you are. I could have had my medieval, imprinting could be from an entirely different time and space, may have nothing to do with even this planet. Just gonna
And it could be happening
throw a
right
wrench into
now.
the whole theory. Medieval time on another planet. Yeah, maybe. Heidi says she resonates with that. Thank you. So, um, yeah, a lovely analogy. It is. So if we're looking at, we'll get back a little bit into the similarities between, let's say, the paranormal and being a UFO experiencer. I know the one that sticks out for me, and if you've worked with experiencers, and trying to figure out what they experience under hypnosis, um, when you're getting into the whole crossover phenomenon, because I think John Keel talked about that as well, right, with different beings and so on, not just so much UFOs, but he also believed that many of the cryptids. So here's another kind of crossover. He believed that even certain cryptids were actually extraterrestrial. But I remember, like, I can only speak of my own experience, and I've helped, like hundreds and hundreds of people with having paranormal anomalies throughout the decades. And I always found it interesting that when paranormal tells you, you know, if you're dealing with malevolent energies, you can have, sulfur smells, foul smells, bright white lights, crackling sounds, dealing with dimensional or multiverse entities. People would see shadow people, or people were seeing cryptids. Like, you just seem to be having these incredible experiences, sleep paralysis, I mean, all kinds of things, you know. But when I started realizing that half of the people I was helping, half of them were also ET experiencers. So when I started digging and found that ET experiencers experience foul smells such as sulfur, I've experienced the bright lights, the crackling sound, all of the stuff I've experienced made me question, what was I really experiencing in my own paranormal phenomenon? Because when half of the people you're working with says, "Oh yeah, I saw a UFO," one of the best people I've worked with, the best cryptid sighting I've ever heard of, there was a UFO sighting, like, that was called into the police for a straight week in that area, and the whole phenomenon was just a big ball of mess with
Yeah.
everything. It's, you get to one place where everything happens, that was it. So I don't know, do you
Yeah.
have people telling you that, like, when you're talking to people on your show who come on, maybe as paranormal experiencers, but who are also experiencing the same phenomena?
Well, I have seen lots of people have seen this, that the after effects of being an experiencer and having a near-death experience are very similar.
Oh,
Like, they have
okay.
amazing synchronicities. They
Mhm.
can't wear watches because the mechanical watches just break down.
Mhm.
Electrical devices will freak out when they're around,
Mhm.
and they have psychic stuff. Some people might be psychic before the ET experience, and
Yes.
afterwards it goes ballistic. And
Yes.
that's the same thing that happens with near-death experiences.
Mm.
So what's going on there with consciousness and how it affects us? And, I think some experiences talk about poltergeist activity in their house.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it is all connected in some way,
Mhm.
but it's so strange.
You're getting into the crossover phenomena is in every aspect. I mean, when you're seeing, for example, Bigfoot, people report seeing glowing balls around them, like orbs. You get into the sleep paralysis. That's interesting as well. I mean, in the paranormal, they'll call it like the hag syndrome, the old hag pushing down on your chest. Whereas people who are claiming abduction are saying, no, there was bright light and there was a heaviness on my chest. And, science will say, because I remember Canadian scientists had tried doing this experiment to recreate what it felt like. I've had sleep paralysis a couple times. It's terrifying, and your logical mind is trying to make sense of it, and it can't. But it messed him up. The experiment messed him up because he's just said, like, I know the feeling of being watched, that there were other beings in that room with me was so terrifying. That it goes, it undoubtedly to me felt like the phenomenon was a real phenomenon. So it's just like, what is it that, like you say, consciousness, like, what is it that connects everything to leave us sitting here going, what just happened?
Yeah, I know. And is it that we're being given this stuff on purpose? I don't know by who or what. It's like the universe is throwing these things at us,
Yeah.
and some people seem to get them, and other people don't even seem to experience anything ever. Or they're going around like,
I know.
I imagine, some kind of bumbling oaf, and all these things are happening, and they just don't notice it.
I know. To me, it's, they say once you see it, you can never unsee it. But what does it take to make you see it? Um, Yeah, see, I grew up not far from Laurentian University, and they really got into some high strangeness stuff, and they had, this astronomy department, everything. They were great. He had the God helmet. He called it sleep paralysis, 2 o'clock wow syndrome. No, this was a different guy. This was a different, definitely wasn't from Laurentian. So, but I have a version of the God helmet, and when I had to sign a million papers to get it in the country, and at that point, when you read the instruction, it goes, "It can cause you to, some major malfunction, in your neurological your neurological, brain," and it's like, "Yeah, I don't think I'm interested in trying this," even though I had a lot of people volunteer. I'm like, "You're all ridiculous. You could totally end up having a lot of physical issues after this." Um, she said, "I told my doctor when I woke up in a tunnel of water with bubbles coming up. I tried to touch it. It wasn't there. I was definitely awake, and my doctor said it was sleep paralysis. Yet I could move." That's interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. I think I had sleep paralysis once, but it was just horrible,
Yeah.
just because I couldn't move. And,
Mhm.
the light was on in the room, and my wife was in the room. She was walking around the bed, and I could see her, but I couldn't say anything, couldn't move any of my limbs.
Mhm.
It's the only time I've had it. And, no UFO experiences or anything there, or shadow people, but still,
Mhm.
I really didn't like it.
Mhm. No, they say if you can force yourself to move even one digit, it'll bring you out of it. And I was able to, the first time it happened to me, I was able to get myself sitting up. And I sat up, and I was just like, I was like, "Oh, like, what did I just experience?" Like, I had never had sleep paralysis before that, well into my adult years. And then ironically, like, maybe, I don't know, a few weeks later, a couple weeks later, I had another one. I was just like, but I've never had one since. So I don't know. Question for you: do you fear death? Hi, Thomas. Do you fear death,
I don't
Simon?
fear death.
No?
There's certain things I might fear that would kill me, you know? You don't wanna be in a lot of pain when it happens.
So it's the method of your demise you fear more than death
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
Yeah, I can understand
There's
that.
there's there's a joke that says, something like, "I'm not scared of dying, I just don't wanna be there when it happens."
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. I think that's the part that's most frightening is just not knowing besides that, just to slip away quietly while you sleep is good. That's a good thing. So I think with death being the next level of our evolution, so maybe if you just sort of put it that way, for those who fear it, may give a different perspective.
Yeah, they say people come and collect you. There's all these people with deathbed visions who, in the last days of their lives,
Mhm,
hospice nurses see this a lot.
mhm,
And I talked to a woman called Dr. Penny Sartori.
mhm,
She is a NDE investigator, and she's had her first night as a nurse in a hospice, and
mhm.
they all came together in this room for a briefing, and the head nurse said, "Such and such in this room is talking to people who aren't there, so we think she's probably going to die tonight." And Penny Sartori thought, "This is a prank. I'm the new one. They're playing a prank on me." And she said, "Sure enough, I went into the room, and that person was talking to people who weren't in the room."
Yeah.
And, it's like her husband or a dad had come
Mhm.
to collect her.
Yes. Isn't that absolutely fascinating? I've experienced a couple of different versions of that, and sometimes one of them was recounting an old, comedy, an old movie, like Who's on First? Oh, no, Who's on Second? I can't remember the name of that.
Yeah,
Was that a Three
Abbott and
Stooges?
Costello.
Oh, but it's like, okay, yeah, and she kept recounting that, and I'm going, "Wow. Whatever you're doing, it's awesome." And she was just totally and just conversing, but she kept repeating movies and things like that, and, Wayne had experiences also, with his mother, having a conversation with him, and she'd say, "One moment, dear," and she'd have a conversation with somebody about a cat, then turn around and she'd say, "Okay, I'm sorry, continue." It's like, "What?" Like, and then they see things. She thought she was back in England, because he's British. So she thought she was back in England, and she's just like, "Oh," she goes, I'm trying to go into the tunnel, and I'm trying to get on this train, and they won't let me take my baggage." Really? She had a lot of it. So we're like, "Oh." But it's interesting how
Yeah.
you see these visions that mean something entirely different if you decipher them, like getting on the train with your baggage, and like you can't take it with you. So you have to leave it behind. So you have to have this resolution, right?
Yeah, I talked to a guy, Dr. Christopher Kerr, who's director of a hospice, and he had to go through these ethical boards to
Yeah.
do a study in deathbed visions
Yeah.
because he saw it so much in the hospital. So he did a proper clinical study and
Mhm.
talked to all these people who were having these experiences. And
Mhm.
one of them said to him, "I was back in 1926. I was sitting at the table having tea with my mum and dad." And so Christopher Kerr said, "So this was a dream that you had?" He goes, "No, I was there. I was actually there. How did they do that?" And that's part of this thing. But
Yeah.
the phrase deathbed visions comes from the 1920s
Mhm.
when one of the members of the Society for Psychical Research wrote a book about it, and that's what he titled the book. And I said to Dr. Christopher Kerr, if they were writing about it 100 years ago, don't you think the medical profession should have catch up by now?
Yes. Yes. It's insane. It's insane. Wayne, my sister's mother, she was always on about the train and baggage and didn't know how I managed to get to France when I have to work the same evening. Because, oh, that's right, there's a tunnel now. It's just, I love it. I love hearing these stories. It's like when someone like in a coma, for example, and anxious to hear your opinion on it. Do you think that they just sit there, that the spirit just resides in the body the whole time? I'm a big believer that we just Why would you sit in the car and you're in the garage? You're not gonna sleep in your car in the garage. You're gonna go and gonna go on with your life because our essence is life. So what do you think? What are your theories on that? Because you talk to so many people.
Yeah, people have near-death experiences when they're in a coma. I don't suppose you can really call it a near-death experience because they don't die,
Yeah.
but they talk about just suddenly finding themselves standing next to the bed and they can see their body in the bed and they feel great. And then they go on to have some big spiritual experience, but they can talk about what they saw in the room. And when
Mhm.
they come out of the coma, they say, I saw this thing and that thing happen. And the nurses will be like, you couldn't have seen that. You were in a coma. You were completely without consciousness.
Mhm.
How could you have seen that? And they're saying, well, I watched it from over there, not from when I was in the bed.
See, right there. And I love that when you say that they went on and had this completely other experience. Like they're still just living. So if the body isn't functioning, it just it lends to the theory, which goes back to past lives and what it is you do, that the spirit doesn't sit there, it just moves on. And then what happens if you end up with like a walk-in? I mean, how many people have woken up and said, like, I don't know who you are? They think it's the brain, but you know,
Yeah,
it's the
it's
essence.
so odd.
Yeah. Like the essence, just like,
Yeah.
I have no idea you're my wife. I don't know who you guys are. You're my kids. Can you imagine after waking up, you've been sitting there like at your loved one's bedside all this time and they wake up and they have no clue who you really are?
And there's people who have that terminal lucidity, who have really bad Alzheimer's and they get to a point where their physical brain is just not capable of consciousness.
Yes.
And just before they die, they come back and they're talking normally. And
Yes.
it's not possible for the brain to support that. And some people have asked them, where have you been? And they just said something like, I was resting. That's just what they say.
So the
And there
or
was,
the essence is resting.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I talked to another guy. He said his mum went into this hospice and she'd had Alzheimer's for a long time.
Mm,
And so when she was at home, they lost her really. She was completely catatonic.
mm.
And then they got a call from the hospice saying, your mum wants to know where she is and she thinks she's been kidnapped.
Oh,
And he had to go into the hospice and she was having this terminal lucidity
wow.
because last thing she knew, she was at home. Next thing, she's in this hospice. Thought it was like a prison or something.
That to me is a complete anomaly because how do you like the physical doesn't allow it, but yet the spirit overtakes and just comes out somehow with all this amazing information like they never had the problem. When my mother
Yeah.
passed, my father was in assisted living with Alzheimer's and my sister went in, they wanted to break it to him even though he was, he would see her all the time. But, when she passed away, he he couldn't speak anymore, but he kept wheeling down. We making my sister follow him, and he kept pointing up. And he's going like this, like, trying to say my mother's name, and he's pointing. And before she passed, she says, "No, I'm just gonna go and stay with your father, so he's not scared. And I'll stay with him till his time comes." A year later, pretty much a year, 14 months, he passed peacefully. So it's just, it's just incredible how it all comes together. And it's just so aware.
Yeah. How it all connects up. So we've been talking about UFOs,
Yeah.
reincarnation,
Yeah.
deathbed visions, and
Yeah.
walk-ins, and all these different things. It's all connected somehow.
It is. I truly believe that we look at all of these different, phenomena or all of these different aspects of again one field into the other field and they do all cross over into one another. How many people are having I always look at even like Edgar Casey, like just trying to connect why people had certain behaviors and goes in there and channels it and finds it. It's just like you're out there. It is all about energy and vibration, the frequency. I think if you can get, I'd like to say we all have to be on the same one to experience all of the stuff, but I just think we need to find our own, like what resonates. Like, what are your thoughts on vibration frequency? What makes it all work the way it does?
I don't know. They talk about quantum physics, don't they? Like
Yes.
Nikola Tesla says, if you want to know
Yeah.
about reality, it's all about frequency.
Yeah. All of it. He always said it's about frequency and vibration and universal numbers 369, and it's just like, that's just so the mathematics side of things is just so over my head, but the energy side of it is what makes complete sense to me. And just we could all be experiencing the same thing, which takes us back full circle to how we could all see this a UFO, or we could all see this thing, but you have one person maybe who doesn't. There have been stories of like a craft appearing in a cityscape, and you have half the people or 30% of the people who saw it, and other people just going, "I don't see a darn thing." Like a large majority of people don't see it. So, I mean, do we all have to tap in, like you say, to that frequency? And how do you do it? How do you get there?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe meditation might help or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm reminded of a story where this guy he's an experiencer throughout his life, and he was in
Mhm.
the back garden with some friends, and this
Mhm.
UFO came over, and he said it was so low he could throw a stone and hit the bottom of it, but then the whole area just went silent, and it was like they were in this bubble, like the Oz factor, I think they call it,
Hmm.
and they were all just kind of standing there looking up at this UFO, not moving,
Mhm.
and then the UFO zipped off. And he
Mhm.
was there the whole time watching it, and the girl next to him said, "Where did you go?" And he said, "I didn't go anywhere." She said, "But you weren't here." So that might be some
Wow.
kind of frequency weird thing happening.
There has to be. There has to be, because so much it's energy based. The essence is energy based, right? So it's just like there has to be all involved. I don't know. I work with a lot of frequencies. Like I'll sit there and I always say, like I'll be sitting here in a meeting, and my desk always has different, you know, I'm always playing with tuning forks. I've got a gong, I've got chimes, I've got all kinds of things. I love it. I love how it makes you feel. It's great for healing. So tell people if you don't have access, just throw on some binaural beats. Get on YouTube. Most people have that now. But and I find one day I just was listening to binaural beats, and I was just starting to fall asleep. I wasn't even like meditating. I was just listening and trying to take in the sounds. And all of a sudden, it was startled me back up was this female voice in my ear going, "Hello." Looking around. Is that the bird? That's a bird. We're house sitting a parrot. I'm just like looking around. No, not the bird. So it's just like without even being aware, you just slip into this other place.
Yeah, and there's the Monroe method, isn't there, that plays all those kind of sounds to you, and you can go into that. And you can
Mhm.
go to the Monroe Institute and spend a week there and have
Yeah.
all this training how to do it. There's a
Yeah.
guy who was on my podcast who did that, and now he's a Monroe instructor.
Oh, wow. How
It's
awesome is
just,
that?
yeah, and he was one of the things he said he was during the week. They said, while you're listening to this stuff, just imagine you're in a dark, just a black space, and then
Yeah.
you have a vision of the earth as a ball, and you can hold it. And he
Mhm.
just couldn't get there. And then this woman appeared out of the darkness and handed him the ball, and he had it. And
Wow.
afterwards, they all went to have lunch, sitting together, and the woman was there, and she said, "I realized you couldn't get the ball, so I gave you mine."
Oh my gosh. How amazing is that?
Yeah.
Wow. So you're in with somebody else essentially.
Yeah, they were all in their own little
Yeah.
pods, these little
But she
units.
seemed to cross right over into his space, like a form of
Yeah.
remote viewing, I guess, or is it just I don't know. I wish we had more time. It just goes, it just really goes into different directions when you start exploring it all, because you'll say things and my brain will go, "Wait, what?" And then there's just more questions and more questions, but it was a fantastic segment. I love how we were able just to bring so much together. And thank you to everybody in the chat room. You guys always make it that much more awesome. And a big thank you, Simon, for joining me. today or tonight for yourself. And hopefully we can do it again. And watch for Simon to be on Paranormal Heart podcast coming up in the next few weeks. And that's right here on the United Public Radio Network. So if you missed the segment with him on his new book, Near-Death Experiences, where can they find your book? Let's want to promote that as well.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's called Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife.
Yes. Okay. And I'm just going to put your website up again, which is even better, as you guys go check it out. And if you're interested in a past life regression, or if you're an ET experiencer and you're brave, unlike myself, if you're brave and you really want to know what happened, then go and check him out for that as well. So thank you again for joining me. And again, I'm hoping we can do it again, especially if you write another book, Open Door Policy. You come back.
Yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, as have I. Thank you. Everybody, thank you for tuning in this afternoon, this evening. Tomorrow night on The Outer Realm, the main show, my dear friend, fellow co-host, or host here at UPRN, Preston Dennett, returns to discuss UFOs over the Arctic. I think we left off with the Antarctic, and there's just rolled into this, so we're going to get right back into it. Thursday, also dear friend and fellow host of Ethereal Encounters Unveiled, Carol Ann Idarola joins me to discuss death, the afterlife, grieving loss, and moving on. So it's going to be a very touching and deep show. And she's going to be speaking firsthand of her own accounts. So please tune in and show her some love. Anyway, guys, thank you and good night.